YouTube Venom community, Who fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about The Who's second album, released in the US, Happy Jack, released on Decca Records in April of 1967, about 5 months after the original A Quick One, released in the UK in December of 1966. So, a little bit of a different change-up from what the British version was. Not too different though. They took off the track Heatwave, added the lead single Happy Jack, which was their first big top 40 hit in America, so America was kind of getting a taste of The Who at this point. And they put it out as Happy Jack. Didn't really sell like a crazy amount. I mean, the band wasn't really popular in the States until basically the Smothers Brothers, and then really with Tommy. So, with that said, Decca was still happy to put out the record and see what would happen. So a little bit of different changes on the back too. The original back cover was just all black with a kind of a lighting, shadowy thing on the faces of the guys saying "Who, the Who." This one's kind of fun. Just what's that word with a bunch of pictures are together? My brain tonight, you guys. Montage, collage. Hey, that's the word. A collage of pictures of the guys with a bit of a little detail about them, which is a real funny thing about Keith wanting to breed chickens, which they just made up, but it sounded funny. It sounds very Keith Moon. So Happy Jack, this album kind of came to be because, well, not because, but they were changing as a group already at this point, having been known as the mod R&B group throughout 1964, 65, and the early parts of 66. The mod scene was beginning to die by the end of the 1966, early 67. That kind of stuff was changing, and more of the psychedelic kind of thing just was taken off. But, you know, and I think The Who felt that, and I think they didn't want to stick with that one thing over and over and over again. And the cool thing that I like about this album is that this being their second release as a full length, already shows that each album they would have put out after this was going to sound different from the last one. They never made the same album twice, which I always thought was fascinating. Each album they made was another step in a completely different direction to show their artistic strengths and their talents and how creative they could be, you know, while keeping it sounding like The Who, but also sounding like a slightly different Who each time. And still keeping a commercial success and still wanting, you know, still people wanting to go see them and hear them and see what they can do next. A lot of bands can't get away with that kind of stuff, but The Who did. So as, you know, Beatles, eventually the Stones for a while there, but Pink Floyd. So what I like about this album a lot is that you took the first album, My Generation, which, you know, a lot of that is covers, James Brown songs, which they do an excellent job with. But kind of half original, half cover. But for this one, their managers were like, you know what, I want each guy to write 2 songs, and we'll go make an album and see what happens. And so this is where The Who kind of figures out how to become The Who. John's on here doing his songs for the first time. You get Whiskey Man and Boris the Spider, his classic Boris the Spider. So 2 songs with his dark, sort of twisted humor. Keith has a couple of moments on here that are absolutely fantastic. Who knows if he wrote the whole thing himself. It was probably a group effort, but, you know. And then Roger's got a song on here, too. He didn't do 2, he only did 1. But, you know, he would write a couple more here and there for the group over the years, but not a whole lot. So it's cool to see him on here, too. And it's a fun album to see them as a group. All of them writing, all of them singing, all of them playing instruments, even Roger. So that's a lot of fun, and I think the group knew that they couldn't do the same thing twice, and within a year they would have come out with The Who Sell Out, one of their best albums. Again, another complete departure from their original sound, even a year and a half before. You know, completely diving headfirst into psychedelic sounds, and you know, seeing where they can go with that, and being very successful at it too. But, you know, in 1966, The Who were on tour constantly. They played a show almost every single night that year. And this led to them being together a lot. And for anyone who knows about the early years of The Who, they were not a band that got on with each other too well. And they liked to fight. Or they at least believed that the audience liked watching them or knowing that they would fight at some point. Maybe it was a gimmick. People buy records because of that. Look at Oasis with the Kinks. I mean, people like watching fights because it keeps the music interesting and keeps the public wanting more. Whatever. But, you know, so they were really not getting out with each other a lot at this point. You know, Roger would do this thing where he would hit his cymbal, hit Keith's cymbals with his microphone, or just hit him on his own, which drove Keith insane. You know, a couple of guys showed up late to a concert one time, and they got sacked. You know, apparently Pete hit Keith in the face or something with his guitar for being late to a show. I mean, a lot was happening. John and Keith even left the band for a while. I think Roger was fired for a little bit, sometime around May of '66. So, like, these guys were constantly, like, falling apart and coming back together again. They were broke as hell all the time because they were constantly smashing up their gear and then not making enough money to go back and buy new stuff. They'd either repair what they had or take a guitar off the wall and say, all right, I'll pay you back later. And who knows if they did, but they were constantly strapped, and so they worked all the time. And they kind of had a reputation for, not a reputation, but Pete was so outspoken already at this point that he would say things like, we don't believe in quality. What we make isn't quality recordings. It's, what the phrase that he used was basic shepherd's bush enjoyment, which I think is a fantastic phrase. But I think it's just them being brash young kids. They were like 20, 22 years old when this thing came out. It's just that mentality. You have this on top of the world feeling. I guess if you're in a group that's selling records and you're on TV and stuff, you feel like you can just kind of say what's on your mind, and you're a kid, So, your opinions about rock music and the pop world and what the fans might expect of your music is going to change a ton over the years. So stuff that Pete would have said in 1966, who knows if he would have felt the same way in 2006? Probably not. That said, I really do enjoy this album. I like seeing them branch out and showcase all the other guys, and it's a complete departure, if you ask me, from the first album. There's a tiny bit of elements once in a while in the R&B groove, but for the most part, it's a pop rock album that really kind of goes in a couple of different directions that the first album and the first era of that group would have never done. So to hear them explore and go new places and get creative and kind of see where their talents can lead them, I think is fascinating. And I don't think this album gets enough credit for the work that's on it and for what would have led later on. Beyond the title track of A Quick One While It's Away, I think that obviously gets enough credit because of what would lead to rock operas down the road, but the rest of the album itself, I think, deserves a careful examination. So with that, Run, Run, Run starts off this album, which, there's probably 100 songs with that title, but this one I think is my favorite. This is the only song on the album for me that sounds like it could have been on My Generation. This one does have a bit of that R&B mod type feel. It's propulsive, it doesn't stop. I think that riff is so cool. That like sort of Batman-ish inspired feel. And then Keith's drumming on this one is actually kind of controlled, which I think lends itself well to the whole balance and structure of the song. But it's fun. It's singable. It's hummable. The words can get stuck in your head really easy. I like the way Roger delivers it. It's one of the only songs on this album where he has like a bit of a gruffness to his voice. The rest of the album, he's actually a little bit more controlled. He's lost a little bit of that R&B macho kind of thing, and he's kind of like just singing and seeing how it goes. This is the time where he was flat ironing his hair, so I mean he was a little bit more in tune with his own voice or something, or in tune with himself or something, or just growing as a person. But I mean the overall construction of the song I think is great, and it's just a fun lead off for the new Who. I think they sound so confident and so full of energy, and they were playing a million shows a night, so they were a tight group at this point. And they can read each other really well. I think that chemistry lends itself extremely well to the entire album. The first album was them as a new band. It's them just basically doing their stage show recorded. A lot of bands' first albums were like that. Please Please Me was like that from the Beatles. So to hear them kind of grow and write new tracks for a new album that's in a whole new direction that wasn't stuff they were doing already beyond Heatwave, very cool. Then you get Boris the Spider, and you were just jumping head over heels, head first for this one, because you finally get to experience John's dark, twisted humor. I guess you can't even call it twisted. It's just kind of a funny, dark humor. About a guy who's hanging out in his place one night and sees a spider and decides to kill him at the end. So but he goes through this whole journey of the whole story about he's watching him crawl, he's watching him walk around the wall, he's watching him go over here, over there, he's in a ball, it's just this, over the span of what could have been probably 2 minutes of watching the spider, he wrote the song. It's just great. You get to hear the classic, Boris the Spider voice, which I perfected in high school. you get that real heavy bass sound, and that bass is just like thundering and lumbering, dun 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 dun. And it sounds eerie. It sounds like a horror movie. And the creepy crawly stuff in the background, it sounds like Halloween music, which are elements that would stay in John's music for a long time. That was just a part of his, musical DNA, was to write songs like that. But it's so fun, and I think it definitely also showcases how much of a welcomed balance having John's songs mixed in with Pete's songs is. Especially on further albums down the road, when you get to My Wife or Success Story, 905, having him blend in with the rest of Pete's tracks always is a nice reprieve, and gives it some texture, instead of just being Pete's songs, which are great anyway, but it's always nice to have John's additions on there. I Need You, this is the Keith Moon song. This is a really cool song. I like the bits of harpsichord throughout this thing. I think Keith's singing on this one's really good. I think it's a combination of him and Pete. I think their voices kind of blended to kind of sing this one. I could be wrong. Please correct me if I am wrong. But I like this one again and a lot because this one for me also showcases his drums very loudly, especially in the Please Talk to Me Again part before they say I Need You. It just sounds like he's crashing through the speakers like at a billion decibels. Just as much as John's bass on Boris the Spider is instantly recognizable, and you hear it so well, it's John's song. On this one, you hear the drums extremely loud because it's Keith's song. So, really dig that. And a little bit of country western feel at the end, I think is kind of fun too. But, yeah, cool construction to a song, total pop hit. I like it a lot. Whiskey Man, another classic John. Here he is playing with, alter egos and, other parts of his psyche. When you get drunk, you turn into a different person, and it's about this guy who might be, crazy or deranged or whatever. Kind of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like he would write a year later. So again, more of that dark kind of thing from John, but this song in particular has so much heavy brass instrumentation on it that The Who of 18 months earlier would have never touched a song like that. But to hear them grow and expand and let the other guys write songs, I think was the best idea they could have done because it helped expand their sound. Where when you get to an album like Quadrophenia, that thing's loaded with horns. You think of the song 515 or whatever, it's just pounding with brass instruments. But the eerie storytelling element of John is full swing here again, which is great. A lot of fun to listen to. Cobwebs and Strange, this basically sounds like what would be happening inside Keith Moon's head. I mean, I never met the guy, but everything I've read and video I've seen about him just sounds like this is what's playing in his brain all the time. And that's a cool thing. I mean, that song for me was one of the first, when I first started getting into The Who and I heard that song, that was one of my, I need to learn how to play this on drums. My drum set needs to be able to figure out how to do this. It took a while, but I got it. His drumming on that song is absolutely insane, and I love that they showcase that. I love that they give him room to breathe, just as they had with My Generation with John on that bass solo that's so iconic. I think it's cool to have Keith go crazy on this, but everyone played instruments on this one, including Roger doing some of the brass. I think he played trombone or tuba on that one actually, but it's just a fun, weird, quirky song that sounds like a circus that got drenched in acid one night. And I love the sped up, fast forward stuff, and then Keith trying to keep up with that. A lot of fun to listen to, which is a good introduction to get to Happy Jack, because you get way more of his drums as well throughout that whole song. I mean, this is just a whole tune for Keith to just go crazy on. And his drumming on this track is so fun and so characteristic of him. Those fills that only he can do that make them sound so interesting and so much a part of the song that without the drums, the song might fall kind of flat. It'd be a good song, but Keith doing those drums makes the song for me. A weird little song, but still a fun one at that. And the video, I remember the video was pretty cool of them playing old-timey robbers trying to break into a house or something, and they find cake at the end or something. It's been a while since I've seen that. And that ends side 1 on this album. Side 2 starts off with Don't Look Away, a song written by Pete. And this song is definitely interesting for me. It doesn't sound like a Who song. It sounds like, kind of a random pop rock track. In the sense that there's so much acoustic guitar on this thing, it doesn't sound like a Who song because they were known as being the loud, brash, electric band. to hear them do this, I think is a lot of fun. But the chorus of this song is the construction rather is cool because there's so many changes throughout this song, and they stick in your head, and they're super catchy. But the pre-chorus lines are creative the way they're split up. They kind of the whole stop breaking stuff. And then the chorus itself has changes throughout that as well. But mixing that and then a bit of the Everly Brothers kind of Birds vibe, but in the Who style. Fascinating track. It'd be cool to see them kind of bring them back if they ever did like a live show again, which they might do some. But I think that'd be a cool one to throw into their set just to throw people off for a curveball. But very interesting song. That song I don't think gets enough credit. Very cool track. See My Way. This is the one that Roger did, and it's not a bad song. It's, for me personally, easily the weakest song on the album, but that's not saying much. I mean, it's a good song still. But compared to the other good songs, this would be my least favorite good song that is on the album so far. It stays in your head, and the lyrics are a bit of a tongue twister. And it's fun. It's a little bit of catchy, but not my favorite. And I don't really have too much to say about it beyond that. I'm glad that Roger wrote a song, and it's good. It's a cool song. So Sad About Us, easily one of the best Who songs ever of the early years, and really of any of their songs. I think So Sad About Us is a great song. And maybe this would be like the send-off track saying like, okay, this is the last mod-ish song we're going to do. And it's not even a mod song at that. There's not really any R&B-ness to it, but, I think a lot of people have kind of not seen it like that, but they could maybe take it that way, but also they could just see it as a story about, heartbreak and passion and growing up. I think Keith going wild on this song, the precision that they all play it with, the harmonies on it are fantastic. It's a great track to listen to, and really captures your attention. Easily the strongest song on the album, if you ask me. I'd say even more so than a quick one. I think So Sad About Us is the best song on this album. There's a great version from the Live at the Royal Albert Hall DVD that they put out in like 2001 or something. I think they filmed it in 2000, where Paul Weller from the Jam and Pete Townsend did a version of it together. It's really good. It's 2 acoustic guitars. It works really well. And then you lead off, you end with, it's the complete opposite. You end with a quick one while he's away, the title track of the English version and the last song on the American version as well. But, so Pete and the managers realized they needed to fill up some more space here, and so at the suggestion of the managers, they were like, what, Pete, why don't you write like a bunch of small songs, kind of put them together and make a story out of it and see what happens. And Pete was like, challenge accepted, and lightning struck, and this was the catalyst for what would become his obsession with, the concept album, or even a concept song, or just the concept of a concept. Without this song, you would have never gotten things like Rael off the next album, and then you would have never gotten Tommy, Lifehouse, Quadrophenia, Psychoderelict, the whole Wiring Glass. It goes on and on and on from there. Like, the whole thing just cascaded from there. This was the thing that started it off. And so while the studio version is a bit choppy in the way they kind of threw it together, it's still a hell of a lot of fun to listen to. Hearing all the different bits and pieces here, there's a bit of country and western here, there's some rock and roll here, there's some just vocalness stuff here. And there's a part where they didn't have a cello to use, so they all just yell cello, cello, cello over and over again, which I think is one of the best stories in rock and roll. It's an interesting song because no other bands were doing stuff like this at that point. That's a very unique thing to The Who, was to do, a super long song made up of multiple parts that change with a story to tell. And keep it interesting at the same time. You can have a long song, but it can be boring as hell. Having it change up like this and still keep your interest, very cool, and kudos for doing it well. So yeah, that's that album, that song in particular would grow as they would play it over the years, and eventually, a couple years later at the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus, that's easily my favorite, and for a lot of people, the best version of the song they ever did. That version, hands down, if you look it up, Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus, A Quick One While He's Away, The Who, it'll blow you away. It's one of the best things they ever did at that point. But yeah, very interesting song, and definitely the first rock opera of its kind that would, lead Pete to keep going. But let me show you the inside of this thing. This is the original. No, this is a London Records insert. This isn't even the original insert. I don't know what happened to that thing, but um, it's you don't see a lot of this stuff too often. This is a mono copy, I believe. I think it's mono. Yeah, from what I've heard, people really like the stereo version of this album. I'll have to see if I can dig one up, but yeah, here's the. I love the old Decca labels. You might not be able to see the colors too well, but there you go. Yeah, the old Decca label is so cool, but go back in there. So, oh yeah, one comment about the album cover itself, which I thought was cool. It's the same guy who did the Beatles illustrated books, Alan Partridge, did this thing. So if you've seen the illustrated Beatles book, the lyrics, it looks like this because it's the same guy. What do you know? So, overall, this album definitely shows a band in transition and figuring out their next step, which was going to be, diving headfirst into psychedelic rock with the Who Sell Out. But for what it is, for this album, this period of the band, I love this 1966 era Who so much. Their songs are fun, they're lighthearted, they're not getting too serious, they're still such a new band. Life hadn't gotten insanely hard for them yet. Drugs hadn't become they were taking drugs, but drugs and alcohol hadn't hurt their lives yet. They were so young and so naive and so new at this stuff that it's just fun to hear a bunch of early 20-somethings get together in a studio, write a bunch of songs, and make an album and see what happens. So, for me, this is a great album and something that I think definitely needs another look at and definitely needs to be reconsidered as an important step in their career for sure. I think a lot of people overlook it. They really do. And give it a chance because it's a great bloody album. So with that, I'm going to give this thing like a 7 or 8 out of 10. It's a band in transition, so it's got maybe a tiny bit of hiccups here and there, but overall, I really like this album. So 8 out of 10. Yeah, 8 out of 10. My name is Giggens. This has been The Who, Happy Jack, the US version of a quick one. Someday I might do the British one, but it's not much different. There's one different song and a different back cover, so there you go. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video, and that's it. Bye-bye.